We're going to start now we're going to start the factoring lesson. This is one of my favorite lessons. I am known in our household as the factoring queen. The most important rule in the factoring, these are the factoring formulas that we're starting out right here at the top of the page. And these were ones that you will need to know, these factoring formulas. The most often used, other than distributive property, so you can add distributive property here. Which is A times B plus C equals AB plus AC. So other than the distributive property, the most common one is the difference of squares. Now, other than those two, you will be using a lot to come x plus h squared. And that is x squared plus 2xh plus h squared. And this is used in calculus a lot. A whole lot. Okay? And so these are the most used of the formulas that you will come across. Okay? Now, you also need to know what it means to be prime, and prime is a number that only has one in itself, and so a squared plus b squared is prime. We will also be factoring by grouping, and we have already talked a little bit about the greatest common factor. And so now let's get down here, and I'm going to do one more little thing that I'm going to talk about right here. Is say that I want to factor x squared, so 1x squared plus bx plus c. So if we want to factor this, then we want factors of c. So we want factors of c that do the sine of c to get b. Not the sine of b, just b. The greater factor will get the sine of b. The sine of b. All right? So if this is, and I'm going to put little minus signs here, so if this is ax squared minus bx minus c, then that's a different thing. So now let's talk about an example of this. So say that I had x squared minus 25, minus 2x minus 35. How do I factor that? I want to go straight into two parentheses. I know that the first one is going to be x and x because my first term here is x squared, so I'm going to have x and x here. So how do I figure out what's going to go in these second slots? Well, I'm going to take 35 and I'm going to factor it. So that's 1 times 35. There's no 2's, there's no 3's, there's no 4, there's no, and then I get 5 times 7. So I'm going to take those factors, and I'm going to say 35 minus 1, and that's 34. And so no, that's not my answer because so I minused it because that's the sine of c. So that's my sine before c. Right? And that's 34. That is not b. So that's not equal to b. So now I'm going to take 7 minus 5. That's equal to 2. That is equal to b. So that is my answer. Okay, so that means I have a 7 here and a 5 here. All right, so these signs, the greater is 7, so 7, this is going to be a minus sign because 7 is greater than 5. Right? So that tells me that this is a minus sign. And because C is negative, I know my parentheses are different signs. Okay, so this is a plus. Okay, so that's how we factor that. So now, that leads us into the next method, which is the AC method. So how do we factor things that have A and a C? And first we're going to multiply A times C, then we're going to find factors of A and C that add or subtract, that do whatever sign is before the C to give us the number that's B. Then we're going to break that B into two terms. Then we're going to group the first two terms together and the last two terms together and factor out our greatest common factors. And then we're going to check our answers. Now, I want to say you can check your answers for all of these. When I check my answers, I will use the distributive property twice. And that is how I will check every single one of my questions that I'm doing. All right? Now, here is a general strategy for how to solve by factoring. Or, I'm sorry, not how to solve by factoring, how to factor. And this is how we're going to work every single one of these questions. You need to remember that a squared plus b squared is prime. All right, let's get to the first example. So I want two factors of 15 that subtract to give me 2. So 15 factors into 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. So 15 minus 1 is 14 and 5 minus 3 is 2. So these are my two factors. So I'm going to have x squared, I'm going to have x and 3 and 5. Since this is a minus sign, that means that my greater factor gets the plus sign, my smaller factor gets a minus. Now, I'm going to check. So CK equals check. To check these, like I said, I'm going to use distributive property twice. So I have x minus 3 times x plus 5. So that's going to be x minus 3 times x plus x minus 3 times 5. So that's x squared minus 3x plus 5x minus 15. So that's x squared plus 2x minus 15. Now I realize that all of you have heard of FOIL. F-O-I-L. First, outer, inner, last. This process right here is how they came up with FOIL. Now, here's one of the big things about this class. You've heard of FOIL, you know the tricks, Now I'm going to teach you where those tricks have come from, because I want you to be able to walk into a classroom and be able to explain how they came up with FOIL. And so that is why when I check, I'm going to show you how they came up with FOIL. I'm not actually going to use it, I'm going to do it. All right, so now let's factor number 2. First thing we do is we pull out our greatest common factor, which is 2x. I'm left with x squared minus 4. X squared minus 4 is a perfect square, so I'm left with 2x times x minus 2, x plus 2. That is the difference of squares. A squared minus b squared is equals a minus b times a plus b. So now if I check this, I'm going to multiply this through the first parentheses, so I get 2x squared minus 4x. That's times, so this is my check. Two x squared minus 4x times x plus 2x squared minus 4x times 2. So then I have 2x squared, 2x cubed minus 4x squared plus 4x squared minus 4 minus 8x, which yields, notice that I am not writing equal signs. If it doesn't have it to start with, I don't add it. All right. So now, how do we go with x to the 4th minus 16? Well, I'm going to use a squared minus b squared. That equals a minus b times a plus b. So that's a squared minus 4 squared times a squared plus 4 squared. Not 4 squared plus 4. So that's a minus 2 times a plus 2 times a squared minus 4 squared. Now to check this, so when I check this, I know that these two, when I multiply them together, I'm going to get a squared minus 4 times a squared minus 4 plus 4. Yikes, miscopied. So then when I multiply these two together, I know I'm going to get a to the 4th minus 16. Okay, so it all checks out. All right, here is our first AC method. So 2 times 3 is 6. Factors of 6 are 1 times 6 and 2 times 3. 6 plus 1 is 7. I'm done, so I don't have to go any further. Now, the way that you break this up is I'm going to break 7 into 1x plus 6x. And I still have the 2x squared plus the 3. And I group the first two terms together and the last two terms together. Now I pull out the greatest common factor out of the first two terms, and I have x, and I'm left with 2x plus 1. And the greatest common factor out of the last two terms is 3, and I'm left with 2x plus 1. Now I pull the 2x plus 1 out, and I have 2x plus 1 times, and I'm left with x plus 3. Now to check, and I have 2x plus 1 times x plus 3. So that's 2x plus 1 times x plus 2x plus 1 times 3. So that's 2x squared plus x plus 6x plus 3. And that's 2x squared plus 7x plus 3. And it checks. And the next one is another factor by grouping. I'm going to group the first two terms together and the next two terms together. Out of the first two terms, I pull out the greatest common factor, which is 3x, and I'm left with m squared minus n squared plus y, and I'm left with m squared minus n squared. I pull out the m squared minus n squared, and I'm left with 3x plus y. I factor the m minus n to m plus n, and I'm left with the 3x plus y. My check, I multiply m minus n I multiply the first two, and I have m squared minus n squared, and I multiply that times 3x plus y, and so I have 3x times m squared minus n squared plus y times m squared minus n squared, and I'm left with 3x m squared minus 3x n squared plus y m squared minus y n squared. And I'm good. Okay, now I have a sum of cubes. All right, and I know that a plus b, a cubed plus b cubed is a plus b times a squared minus ab plus b squared. So it is simply x, and remember 125 is 5 cubed, so this will be x plus 5 times x squared minus 5x plus 25. Now, to check this one, it's not as hard as you think it is, because it's going to be x squared times x plus 5 minus 5x times x plus 5 plus 25 times x plus 5. It's just the distributive property. So it's x cubed plus 5x squared minus 5x squared minus 25x plus 25x plus 125, which simplifies down to x cubed plus 125. And for our last example, we pull out our greatest common factor, and we have 3x, and we're left with x squared plus x minus 6. And we want two factors of 6 that subtract to give us 1, which of course are 2 and 3. So we have 2 and 3, and 3 is the larger, so it gets the plus sign. And now to check our answer, so we have 3x times x minus 2 times x plus 3, so we have 3x squared minus 6x, and we're going to multiply that times x plus 3, so that's going to be 3x squared minus 6x times x plus 3x squared minus 6x times 3. So we have 3x cubed minus 6x squared plus 9x squared minus 18x, which gives us 3x cubed plus 3x squared minus 18x. And it all checks out, and thank you very much. If you have any questions, please